Hi, this is Nathan Anais, Festival Director of Indie Comic Con, a festival celebrating Aussie indie comics. Welcome to Radults.
Welcome to the Radults podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Now, who are you and what do you do?
So, I've been making comics in Melbourne for maybe the past 8 or 9 years. All self-published things. I run a daily cartoon online, and I try and do 1 or 2 books in print per year.
With that, I mean, I've read Mini Tom and I've read some of your other stuff like Key Fighters, and I'll let you drop some other titles later on. But where do you get your influences from?
So I grew up loving superhero comics. I think that's the gateway for most of us.
I think so.
But at the same time, I think the big thing that changed me was Ghost World.
Ghost World.
Because that was a comic book movie, and it wasn't superheroes, and it wasn't spandex, and it was a really human story and a really engaging one. And I think that was sort of what set me on the path to realizing what comics can do, what the medium can do, what it does differently from TV or movie or film or novels or things like that. So yeah.
And I think anyone that hasn't read any work from Klaus, it's probably the go-to title for that.
Yes.
And then as the book itself is what, monochromatic, or is it spot color, or and it was done really well.
It was. It's a very accessible book. Like, I noticed that there are lots of different comic artists whose art is gorgeous, but to give to a new reader, it's quite impenetrable. Yeah. And Ghost World rides that line. It's nice and clear, good storytelling, very easy to follow.
Yeah, it's probably the epitome of when like simplified works best.
Yes.
As well, you know, clear, concise lines.
Yes. And
goes from there. And then the movie was good to boot as well. What was that?
Yeah.
Scarlett
Scarlett Johansson and Thora Birch.
Thora Birch. So yeah, you had really good people in that.
Yes.
Moving on.
So what would you consider to be your writing kryptonite?
My writing kryptonite. I think that my writing kryptonite is probably also what gives me my inspiration. On average, it will take me 3 to 4 months to produce a comic, and in those 3 to 4 months, maybe 2 weeks of that is the peak of the work. That's when I have the inspiration and the energy and the time. So other than that, it's sort of dribs and drabs. I'll get my second wind, if it comes, and the book gets done. So it's sort of being at the mercy of what that internal drive is.
And I see that over the last couple of days you've been putting together a comic.
Yes.
Can you hear more about that, please?
Yes, you may. So on Tuesday night, I was drawing with a friend. We did a very stupid picture of a horse that was a gun, and I thought, I wonder if I could make this into a little comic in time for Indie Comic Con. And so I've released Horse Gunmouth, a very silly 8-page comic that I've done this week, taken across the course of 52 hours. And it's probably the stupidest thing I've ever made.
For people listening, can we get a bit of a little prologue or like any sort of lead into how this came to be and what we can expect by reading Horse Gunmouth?
Horse Gunmouth, we were talking about character designs, what goes into creating different characters and things like that. And we were talking about sometimes there's a bit of nuance, like you'll take a theme and an animal or something like that and you'll merge them. And sometimes it's entirely materialistic. You take an animal, you cover it in accoutrement and accessories and all the lovable things from 90s action figures. And I thought, let's draw a horse and his mouth is a gun, and then I could put the barrel for the gun on the side of his cheeks, and I could put the sides of the handle on the sides of his neck, and that's where that led to.
Brenton's loving this idea.
It sounds brilliant to me.
And then from there, it's like, what kind of adventures does Horse Gunmouth go on? And
only good ones.
Only good ones.
Yeah, it's a lot of screaming, as you can imagine.
Brilliant. I'm really curious as to how this process has taken place, but I'm also very inspired by it. I think that it fits the overall ethos of this podcast, which we're trying to inspire people to just do the damn things that they're interested in doing.
Absolutely.
Right? You've taken this idea that's come out of the abstract and you've put it into motion so quickly. And a lot of people struggle to do that, to take that initial step. I'm wondering if you have any advice to those people that have that issue.
Absolutely. So, especially with running the daily cartoon, I know that my daily cartoon is not drawn to the full best of my ability, but it's something that allows me to get something out every day. So you've just got to do it. Like, a lot of us, we would love to go back and redraw old comics that we've done. We'd do them. If we did it every time, we'd be redrawing the same comics over and over and over and over again. It's about getting something out there and learning from that. A lot of new creators I talk to, there are lessons that you just can't perceive until you've put something out there. Just get something out there, and you'll learn, and it means your next book will be better. Like, you can spend an eternity working on your magnum opus, and then maybe people won't see it. Maybe you won't ever finish it. Maybe you'll burn out. But if you're constantly trying new things and getting it out there and getting the feedback, that product being out there in the world is what teaches you some of the really big lessons.
Absolutely, I think I've learned that as well, and I'm sure you've learned that in various bands that you're in.
I have, and even just in writing too. Like the thing you were saying, like just getting things out there.
Yeah.
I've put out stuff that I would never write now. And I've put out songs that I would never write now, right?
Exactly.
Like, and as a musician, that can be a trap that you really fall into. It's like, is this going to meet my target demographic? Is this going to meet what people expect of me? And the truth is, your most authentic creation is the stuff that comes to you naturally, without overthinking it.
Like, would you say that you listen to those tracks, and whether you like things or don't like things, you're like, all right, next track I'm writing, I'm going to include some of these, or I'm going to try and avoid this? Or...
Of course, and the stuff you write when you're 16, 17, 18, right, is the stuff that's the most authentic and natural. And yes, it's embarrassing and cringeworthy, but there's so much to learn from it.
Yes.
That you can then put into more refined variations of the same thing.
The cringeworthy stuff you made then is what helps you make the good stuff now.
Exactly.
You were talking about that you generally have everything come to a head, you know, all this preparation comes to like a period of time where you tend to put out most work. Mm-hmm. What do you do to recharge your creative batteries?
Working on different things usually helps, even if it's something that, and sort of going a little bit against what I said before, but just drawing something or writing something that maybe someone's not going to see, but to vent some of that energy. And, you know, you do build up a lot of bad energy as well, and sometimes just, all right, I'm going to draw something really trashy, I'm going to vent that out of my system, and I'm going to go back to drawing the good stuff. And the good stuff is the incentive for getting this stuff out of the way.
Are we going to see more of Horse Gun Mouth? I think everyone wants to know.
I think I've got to do a little bit more Horse Gun Mouth.
Please do. And if it ever gets made into a movie, Brenton will do the soundtrack.
I definitely will.
Yeah. I think,
but nothing but spaghetti western hardcore.
Yeah.
Alright, so unfortunately, due to the time constraints we have for these little live podcasts, we're going to have to let you go soon. So before we do, we'd really like to give you the opportunity to plug any material you have coming out at the moment and anything that you're looking at putting out in the future.
Great. So, at New Comic Con today, I've got 3 new debut books. Jeez. I've got Horse Gun Mouth, which
I'm
is...
getting that. I'm picking
that. We'll review it.
We should, at the end of this.
This is Horse Gun Mouth. This is the worst comic I've ever read, and...
I think it will be the best.
Secondly, I've got my 5th Mini-Tom book come out, 106 pages.
Oh, I made it in time.
Yes. It's the first time that I've gone full colour, so it's going to be fun with that. And it's from a really interesting period in my life, so it's really fun to see it come through again. And I've got the 2nd issue of my superhero book, Key Fighters.
I'm going to be so broke. Cast a little bit of Key Fighters.
Key Fighters is a superhero book. It is an anthology series, so there's 2 to 4 stories in every issue, and a few of them will be ongoing, a few of them will be done in ones. Each story is a different team of superheroes, focusing on a sort of keyword concept, where they're key fighters. And each different team, I'm learning to draw in a different style. So this issue features something that I've drawn very manga style, something that I've drawn similar to Goran Parlov, a war artist I love, and the 3rd one I've drawn in the style of Mike Mignola, artist of Hellboy. So learning the different techniques in each of those.
That's brilliant. If people want to find all of these projects you're working on, where can they find you online? Your social handles.
Online, I'm on Instagram at Tom_Tung. On Facebook, I have a site which is facebook.com/xscriptfiction, the name I chose for my comics when I was in high school and I'm very embarrassed about.
The cringeworthy is the
Yep.
brilliant, don't worry.
And on Twitter, I'm Mini Tom Comic.
Brilliant.
Awesome. So we're going to wrap this up with a really fun thing. We like to ask people questions. Generally, we give them a list and go through that. Sort of like a game show, but we're going to give you just one.
Yes.
So on this Rad Break, we call it Rad or Fad.
Mm-hmm.
And your one is variant comic covers. Is it rad or is it a fad?
I think variant comic covers are very rad. I think they are the coolest things ever. I think they get me to buy so many comics, and yes, they are totally a fad.
Oh, both rad and fad. That's a
He's going to
first.
be the next Prime Minister
He
with
is.
those answers.
That is deflect, add for the middle, centrist politics. The man's made for business.
But do you like how he deliberately waited that to the very
Yes.
last minute to throw that
I
in
feel
there?
like he might have a future in podcasting.
He could be. It's very much like those elevator doors were closing, and at the very last minute, he threw the grenade in there.
Yeah.
Just as they closed.
P.S. It's a fad, goodbye.
Well, thank you very much for joining us, Tom. It was rad to have you.
It was rad to have him.
It was rad to be here.
That was
I love how
awesome.
many times he said rad.
I know.
Rad.
It's just definitely rad.
Tom, you're a radult. Have a good day, man.
You too.
I'm Tegan. I'm an illustrator from Melbourne. I draw a lot. I'm recently doing a lot of comics. I have an online comic called Drakeborough Detective Agency, which is a comic about an elf and a dwarf running a detective agency in a modern fantasy world.
I'm so getting that.
It's $40, so it's a bit
I'll
expensive.
splurge.
So I do that online. It's available on Webtoons and Tapas. If you just type it in, it's there. I also do a couple of I'm sorry. I also do a couple of comics that I don't have online. Where I have a comic called Valentine's Day Story, which is a comic I do for like a 24-hour challenge on Valentine's Day. Sorry. And it's basically a love triangle story between a woman, a pizza, and a hamburger.
I feel like the pizza would always win.
Well, you'd think that like it's between them fighting over her, but it's actually the burger and her fighting over the pizza.
Mm-hmm.
And then like it's turned into like another because there's three of them. The first one is that. The second one is I think the pizza getting jealous of the burger. I can't remember at the moment because it was like 2 years ago. And the last one I've done recently, it was like the pizza going back to the first lady to get a relationship advice. It's like, should I stay or should I go? Kind of thing.
I guess you could say that it's a real pizza slice of life story. No? I'm sorry.
That's really good.
I must have like a real illegitimate child out there for all the dad jokes I can do.
You must. There is a future child waiting to be punished.
Punished.
With all your Punisher puns. Anyhow, apart from takeaway food items, what would you consider your biggest influences?
Just at the moment I'm just really just trying to get out of where I am now, just doing stuff. I don't know. I don't really think about it. I just do things. What comes to my brain, like the detective story. I get influenced by like detective TV shows.
Cool.
and plus like old fantasy type things that I'm like, what if they were modern? And also detective story, like procedurals. So that's where I get that from.
It's The Wire with like Charmed mixed with everything else.
Pretty much.
That should be it. That's a mashup I want to see happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like mashups really.
Cool.
I like to think of one thing working with another thing.
Like burger and pizza.
Like burger and pizza and love stories.
And love stories.
There's one I'm coming up now, which is like I haven't even like done 5 sketches of it, but I'm thinking like a person who can like talk to ghosts, kind of inspired by like Ghost Whisperer, but not shit.
I'm sorry, Jennifer Love Hewitt, but you know what? I have to admit, it was a shit show.
I watched it, like I enjoyed it while it was on, but like you can't go back to that. It's one of those shows that like you have to like watch it when it was out.
And then get a lobotomy.
Yeah.
It could be so much better. You could do it like the girl talks to goats.
Yeah.
And call it goats.
I'm actually thinking like this story. It's like this person can talk to ghosts, but he's also a morgue, the guy who cuts up bodies.
Oh, like a coroner sort of.
Yeah. He's like, well, I already have this talent. Why don't I solve crimes with it?
Yeah, he finds that the job in the mortuary is a dead end job. Alright, so moving on away from that before all of us get sued by Jennifer Love Hewitt and anything else we've just ripped on.
She doesn't care. She's like,
Yeah.
what? I can't give you over my millions of dollars.
And still waiting for that Party of 5 reunion that won't happen. What's been the best advice that you've been given when, I guess, pursuing your art and pursuing comics?
I was at a literally yesterday. I was at Pancake Parlor, and this one guy was just eating like a colossal by himself, and he's like, this is something you should say to yourself every day, like when you wake up. And I'm like, this shit won't defeat me.
I like it.
Yeah.
I was like, that's the best thing ever.
Yeah. So like whenever I feel like can't do the sketch. The sketch is shit. The rest of the page is shit. It's not gonna work. This shit won't defeat me.
Did he finish it?
Yeah. And he had a unicorn shape as well.
Oh.
And we're like looking at him, and he's like, "Can I have some water?" And he's like, "Yeah." And we gave him the water, and he's like, "This feels like Drano going down my like going down my throat because it's clearing all the dairy."
And he's dead now, so R.I.P. guy. Like, I don't think anyone
He
can...
went to karaoke afterwards. I went on the train. I was going home. I'm like,
He
nah.
went to karaoke after it.
Yeah.
He's 100% dead up now. Like,
He was telling me like that he was going there and he was gonna like he has a really great Scottish accent. He was gonna sing 500 miles.
is that a go-to? Like, everyone just sings the... Like, if they're Scottish, they go do like... It's the Proclaimers, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the Proclaimers.
Yeah, he's not Scottish. He's like, I have a great Scottish accent.
He's not even Scottish.
I don't want to hear that accent. I don't think.
Yeah.
Bit of a change of direction here. We're curious with how emotions are affected by artwork, and we're particularly interested today in the concept of the first thing that ever made you cry. So, what was the first book that ever made you cry?
Oh.
It's a sad break.
Yeah, book.
It's a sad break. I like it.
Cry. I don't think a book's ever made me cry. I've got like other media that has made me cry, but
The media's fine.
yeah. At the top of my head, it's always gonna be Lion King. Like
Of course.
Yeah, everyone says that.
I've never cried in Lion King.
Really?
How?
What is wrong with you?
It's like literally like he's
That's-
all I do is that.
I can count like 6 times in that movie where I've cried.
Yeah.
Like one of them is the part where he's like, "You deliberately disobeyed me, Simba."
And you feel like he's talking to you?
Yes, it's exactly like my parents.
I think that says more about you than the movie, though.
Because my parents were like that. Everything was a negotiation, right? not an aggressive, like, you have done the wrong thing. It was I'm very disappointed in you.
Yeah. And another thing that made me cry, but no one really, like, I don't think anyone else has. Metal Gear Solid 4, the last 10 minutes of that.
I've not watched that. I've not played all the way.
If you haven't played the games, it's not really immersive. But once you've played all the games, and then like you get up to like that last game, and then like you get up to like that bit where it's like trying to close everyone's like stories. And well, the main character Snake was dying throughout the game, and he like went through hell in the last 10 minutes. I'm just like, keep going. Because like there's one point where you have to keep pressing triangle just to get through this microwave of a room, and you keep pressing it, and I was like trying, and it was just like you kept failing, and I got really, and then you see like then it cuts the screen in half, and one part is like what's happening outside of this room, and it's everyone like dying and like getting defeated. And then it's you in the like Snake in the microwave room, and he's like trying to get up, and you're just pressing triangle, and that just made me like cry.
I think I'm about to cry.
I think I am too. My friend that I went to uni with, Tim Biggs, is the editor at Sydney Morning Herald and The Age for the entertainment section. Primarily, his focus is on gaming. He might be the biggest Metal Gear Solid fan that's ever existed. I'm definitely asking him when you leave the room if he cried during Metal Gear Solid 4. So.
I definitely cried at that. I was like, 12 at the time, and my cousins were over, and I had the door shut because I was like, I'm finishing this game. And then they came in and I'm like, get out!
Like in Hot Rod, where it's like, get out!
This is for older kids.
I've got to ask, like, we're going to end up doing 2 Radults fads now with this one guest, or this 2 rad breaks with this particular guest, because she brought it up herself, so I feel like I have to go to it.
Yeah.
Is Disney remaking The Lion King rad or fad?
That's bad. It's like, oh, like when I first like heard of it, I was like, oh, cool. They're doing like, I thought they were doing the stage musical in a movie, and I was
which would make sense because it goes a little bit more in depth with the character motivations, and it varies from the script a bit.
I was like, it's gonna be like amazing, and then it's like, oh no, it's just CG. I'm like, you already had the animated, like, come on.
Yeah, but now it's with like Childish Gambino and Beyonce.
I remember making music then.
So is Childish Gambino playing young Simba or old? Like
Probably both.
Yeah.
So he's going to be the one going, I wanna be a mighty king. So he's not going to be quite JTT. I just don't see it.
Oh, he could do it. He has a great voice.
Yeah,
I want to go on record to say that I'm a huge Childish fan. I had tickets before he goes and cancels his thing.
He's still playing in New Zealand.
I know.
Anyway, diversion aside.
So going from there, I guess we're going to start wrapping this up. Plug your stuff, where to find it, where to buy it, what to buy.
So you can find me at New Tegan on Instagram, Twitter. And if you just search up New Tegan and just scroll past all the New Tegan and Sarah albums, you'll find me.
All the stuff that doesn't matter to anyone else.
Yeah. I'm on the first page. You'll find me somewhere. Yeah. Just search up New Tegan on Instagram. I'm pretty good on that one.
And you know, what is it? Back in your head.
Alright, well then I'm just going to really put that into this and go, Tegan and Sarah, Radults or Badults?
What?
So a Radult is yourself.
Yeah.
You're a rad adult.
Yeah.
Someone, look, I don't know if I can go political.
A Badult or Trump?
I would say they were rad. I would say, like, every time you see them, you're like, oh, they look cool.
Yeah, they've been famous since I was 16.
Oh, yeah.
But that takes some doing.
Yeah.
Still looks like their parents dressing though.
That's the style now, isn't it?
Alright, well, thank you very much for joining us. That was
Thank you
awesome.
for having me.
We look forward to seeing what you come up with next.
Oh, thanks.
We're now here with Frank
Frank Candiloro at the Indie Comic Con. So Frank, who are you and what do you do?
Well, my name is Frank. I am a comic illustrator from Melbourne. I run the self-publishing label Franken Comics, which I've been running since about 2010. I do a lot of horror and sci-fi comics. Got quite a few monsters in them. And a lot of my comics are about sort of like social outcasts and like trying to and sort of meeting other social outcasts and trying to sort of make a family together in this crazy world. So yeah.
What are your influences when it comes to creating comics and everything like that?
There's quite a few. I'm sort of influenced by a lot of like 40s comics, the golden age of comics. So like artists like Chester Gould, who did Dick Tracy, Jack Kirby, Dick Sprang. Another influence is German Expressionism, which is sort of like it's kind of hard to explain, but it's sort of like really distorted angles, sort of a horror influence like Nosferatu and whatnot. I'm also big into like monster movies and like classic horror films and a lot of heavy metal. So yeah, most of I've got a nice Frankenstein tattoo. So yeah, I guess Frankenstein would be the biggest influence. That's what I named my publishing label after. That's a beauty there.
Podcasting isn't a visual medium, guys, but I did just see that you two had twin tattoos. That's pretty cool.
Where have you drawn on outside of, I guess, your love for these things? Do you take anything from your own life that you put into this, or and if so, when you do that, do you find that not only is it a type of therapy, but is it energizing or exhausting to put that out? And how does it feel knowing that, if you take this from your own personal experience, what it's like knowing that people are reading it?
Yeah, a lot of the experience that I've had in my life do go into my comics. Sometimes it can get quite dark. Like I do sort of struggle with mental illness and depression a lot, and also like sort of feeling, speaking candidly, feeling rather isolated from everyone else. And so yeah, putting that into comics can be quite challenging because I don't, not all the time, but like comics and pop culture in general is a means for me to escape that for a while, to sort of distract myself from all these dark thoughts. So putting them on paper can be quite confronting, but I also remember that there's people out there just like me who might be going through the same thing and who might not have anyone or anything to depend on. I had a really great experience at one of these conventions where someone picked up one of my comics, which was Monster Zero, which is about sort of like bullying and self-esteem, and she actually started like crying right in front of the table over it, and I was a bit shocked. I'm like, "Are you alright?" It's like, "Yeah, it's just a really beautiful comic," and so yeah, it was an amazing experience. So the fact that like maybe these comics are out there helping people is something that it's the one thing that keeps me going. Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess what you sort of build on that, like even though it's sort of can be tough to put it out there and know that you're sort of putting a part of yourself out there, any sort of feedback, if you get that sort of thing, makes it worthwhile. Yeah,
absolutely. Like that, I think is the main reason why I do it. I certainly don't do it for the money or anything. But
I think we've heard that from everyone.
that's like the catchphrase of the Australian comic scene. I don't do this for the money.
I think Jack Kirby's the one that said it. He says, making comics will break your heart. And I'm pretty sure it has for, everyone. I think that it's not an easy road for any one creator. Yeah,
it's definitely happened to me a few times. Certainly not the same thing that Jack Kirby went through. But, I wouldn't wish that on anybody.
Yeah.
So, from this, it seems like you've managed to take a crippling thing for you mentally, and turned it into art, which has given you a sense of power over that feeling. When you were younger, do you wish you knew that was a possibility?
Yeah, absolutely. I think especially like growing up in kind of like the suburbs, sort of near it wasn't quite in the country, but it was sort of on the border between the country and the city. So I did feel quite isolated, and most of the other kids at school weren't really into the same sort of thing that I was. Like, you know, I mean, everyone else was into J-Lo. I was into Black Sabbath, so, you know.
I think we share that cultural experience. Okay.
So, yeah.
For listeners out here, Frank is with us now, like 100% dressed to the nines,
Yeah.
black leather jacket.
Got my Led Zeppelin t-shirt.
Led Zeppelin t-shirt, you know, rings, tattoos, piercings, everything like that. He's got a beard that looks impeccable, slick back hair, so, you know, especially not what you would consider a J-Lo fan to look like. But
No, I have
So
nothing.
it's-
Yeah,
yeah,
I have nothing
exactly,
against
nothing.
J-Lo. It's just not my thing.
No pants. Now, in terms of the influence, you said that you listened to Black Sabbath when you were younger. So I'm assuming that a lot of your musical taste and the aligned quite well with your taste in movies and things, and that you're into horror and
Oh, yeah.
darker elements.
Yeah, definitely.
Were you looking at that stuff for cathartic purposes, or do you think you got into it just because it's cool?
because everyone loves Christopher Lee.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, he's the man. Yeah, it's actually a little bit of both. Like, it's definitely cathartic hearing this sort of music because it sort of lets you know that you're not alone. But I think I also did it as a way to rebel against my parents. I grew up in a really sort of not a strict Catholic childhood, but we got had a bit of the Catholic guilt. But yeah, like so you know we it wasn't quite strict, but we were like banned from watching quite a lot of things. Like I remember at one point I was banned from watching The Simpsons because that was a bad influence. And I think I remember when I brought Duke Nukem 3D on CD-ROM. My friend lent it to me, and my dad was not very happy about that. So yeah, growing up with that sort of thing, I sort of just was, you know, gravitating towards the more darker, like, you know, the darker heavy metal, darker monsters, just because, you know, I'd spent, you know, most of my time growing up without this sort of thing. So it's like, well, you know, I might as well check it out now.
Yes, so going on from that, what element of creating comics gives you the most satisfaction?
It's definitely drawing them. I do like writing them and coming up with different ideas, but when you draw them on page, and especially when I start the inking process, that's really when it really comes to life, you know, and you sort of realize it's not just an idea in your head. It's an actual thing that, you know, you can read and you can share with people. And also designing the front cover, which is when the book really takes on an identity. That's really cool.
Do you tend to do your covers first or last, or like what do you start with? Do you get like a title like in mind before you get to a book, or?
Usually I just have an idea and I sort of write down notes about it, and I think, well, can I take it further? Like, is it going to work in comic form? Then I write a script for it. Then I start drawing it, and then after all that is done, that's when I do the cover. Because I think because once I've, you know, inked all the pages and everything, I know what it's going to look like, and so I can design a cover that like perfectly reflects that reading experience. Like, just so like a reader doesn't look at a cover and like, oh, that's really cool, but then they read it and it's nothing like that. I want the cover to be representative of the material inside.
Yeah, and before we get you to plug your stuff, because this leads into it, you've released a book today. Or you were going to release a book today. Not
quite today. It's actually happening next week. It's going to be a comic launch. The book is called From Norway to Northcote. It's inspired by black metal. It's basically about like a Viking who, like from Norway in the past, who ends up in like the northern suburbs of Melbourne and sort of roaming around looking for meaning. Because, you know, like the whole thing about black metal is that it's from the north, and I grew up in the northern suburbs, so it's like, you know, it seemed to work. Like, it was influenced by me roaming around at night listening to black metal and thinking, hey, this kind of fits. Should do a comic about this.
I think it's actually like reminiscent of like all of us. Like, maybe we're all from Norway and we don't know it.
Maybe.
We got like
that's
swapped
the motherland.
Or we got swapped at birth. We're actually not with our biological parents. Our biological parents are actually wolves, and that's,
possibly, yeah.
Maybe. I'm going to trademark this before it really happens.
Mine would be a wolf that thinks it's a cat.
Oh, not this again.
Yeah.
This isn't the first time. Do you want to just say something quickly? Just.
Not really.
We're going to move on from that. plug your stuff, what you're working on,
Yeah.
what you've released, and where to find it on social media.
Cool. So yeah, the latest book is From Norway to Northcote. That'll be launched at the Fitzroy Beer Garden soon. And after that, it should be available on my online store, which is gumroad.com/frankencomics. You can look up some of my comic work on Instagram. If you look up Franken Comics, that's comics spelt with an X instead of a CS. And if you look up Franken Comics on Facebook, you should find me there.
And we pretty much will end this up with a rad break, which this one I'll let Brenton take over. And
No
go
worries.
from there.
This one we're playing is Rad or Fad.
Okay.
Okay, so you're going to tell us if the one thing we ask you is either rad or it is a fad, and it should fuck off and die.
Okay.
That's harsh. But
Cool.
So, for you, publisher reboots, rad or fad?
Oh, okay. Do you mean like when, like say DC decides to reboot characters and
yeah, and
whatnot?
like, you get like 12 issues into a series and then they start at number 1 again.
Yeah. Look, there's a part of me that wants to be more open about this sort of thing, but no, it's definitely a fad. Like, it's just look, if the story ends up good, great, but that rarely happens. And you know, half the time when it happens, I'm usually like well into a story, and I'm like, oh, this is good. What's the next chapter? It's like, oh, it's gonna be over, and they're gonna pretend it never happened.
I
So
think for like collectors, I don't know how much you collect comics yourself.
not
but
really, but yeah.
As a collector, for me, there's satisfaction in getting into the hundreds, like issue, 120 or anything like that. Or instead, it's like, oh, you've got the whole series of 6 issues, and then it's started again. It's
And DC does that whole thing with like Detective Comics and Action Comics. They decide to get to a certain number, then they reboot, but then they decide, let's go back to the original numbers when it gets close to the thousands or something.
yeah, like what they did with Action Comics. It hit issue 1000 this year, but probably only like 3 months before that, it was only like issue 50.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was issue 50, and then they go, hey, we're getting close to that landmark issue, let's put it back. So you go from, and then the story continues, by the way, it doesn't like change, and so it's like, oh, issue 52, and now it's issue 987, leading up to it. Alright, well, thank you very much for joining us on this show. It's been awesome.
No problem.
Everyone be sure to check out Frank's work, and we all look forward to more black metal comics, so please keep making
We
black
really
metal
do.
comics.
I really like the idea of this new book you're working on.
Yeah.
I think you'd be able to find mead quite easily in the northern suburbs now too. So.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's gonna be at a pub, so I can definitely drink it while I'm watching the book.
Please do. Make sure there needs to be a photo of like some like stout or like really dark beer next to like a copy of this book.
Yeah, you've given me an idea for a promotional image. Thank you.
Yes, that's good. I do have to say one thing though. I do think it's really funny that we're all heavily into this time period where we would have been the first to die.
Yeah, probably.
Like, let's put this together. Between us, we make the average height of one Viking.
We would have been thrown down a river or something.
We have the fighting skills, I'm assuming, of one person who's played a lot of Street Fighter or Tegan.
Yeah.
Right?
I don't think a Hadouken's gonna stop
Yeah,
a fight.
I did see a kid try and throw a Hadouken in a fight once. It 100% worked because it confused the attacker and they ran away.
I was gonna say that kid's now dead. Thanks for joining us.
No problem.
And everyone check out Frank's stuff. And be sure to drink a lot of beer next week.
I promise.
Welcome back to Radults. Here we have our next guest, Aila. Aila, who are you? What do you do?
I do, here I do comics and prints and just like art stuff, and otherwise I'm just generally creative, I guess. I'm a journalist as well. Like to express myself in random ways.
What sort of journalism and stuff do you do?
I just moved to Australia, so at the moment I'm not doing any of that here yet, but back in Sweden I was working at sort of the equivalent to BBC or ABC radio, and did morning shows, and I was a reporter and a program host and producer and bits and pieces.
You've literally done everything. You're what, Sweden's version of like Ray Martin.
Maybe.
Brad Martin.
Yeah.
Brad Martin.
That's your nickname. If you need a roller derby name, Ray
Yeah.
Martin.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. I play roller derby too. Yeah.
So, have you found that working in that kind of a structured media environment has assisted or been detrimental to your creative work?
I think it's definitely helped because you get to play around a lot with like sounds and stuff and like sound illustrations and like tell a story. And when I do my art stuff, I like to have some kind of meaning or tell a story as well. So I feel like it probably lights that creative fire a bit more. Yeah, when you're surrounded by it all the time.
Yeah, I mean that leads into, I guess, my next question, which would be, with your comics and your art, where do you draw your influences from?
My own personal life. It's all pretty much autobiographical, the comics so far, or like friends or people I meet and stuff. But yeah, it's about me.
Does that make it hard? Like, is it hard letting that out into the public, knowing that? Do you easily let them know that this is me? Like, everything you read here has happened to me or people I know?
I mean, both of my comics that I've done so far have my face on the front, so it's kind of hard to hide.
And they're big too.
And they're big, but like it basically started off as therapy for me to just, like I started making comics only a few years ago when I had a really rough time, and it was a way to just like process things. So like it would feel weird to then change it to like not being about me, because yeah, it kind of feels like it has to be.
Yeah.
But I've heard of people that like release stuff under other names or do other things. But I just feel like it's better to just pour it all out. And
Although feel free to like write under Rad Martin.
yeah, exactly. I might take up on that. Yeah.
I'm not gonna let that one go.
You should.
Okay, I've been told.
Don't let me tell you what to do, man. That's not adult
Sorry,
behaviour.
Dad.
Do what you want.
Sorry, Dad.
I think you're going to have a really interesting answer to this, just based off the background you have and also out of the style that your work comes out in. What role do you feel that an artist does or should play in our society?
I think it depends on how you define art, I guess, because like art can be so many things.
Of course.
And I feel like art is life. I mean, it sounds very pretentious, but like, you know, when you go and see like a theater or you read a scene or whatever, and it gives you like a feeling around something, like it might make you feel like, oh, I'm not alone in this, or it might make you feel like just something, you know, and like I feel like that's when you feel alive, when you have those experiences. So for me, I guess it is kind of life, art, and it is society, and like I guess art reflects society but also affects it and can change it as well.
Definitely. I mean, all of our lives have been changed in some way by the artistic output of others, for sure. And then obviously those become the influences on our own artwork that we end up putting out. You touched on something interesting there that I believe that like, my chosen medium is music, right? And to me, being in a room with other people experiencing a live show is the most powerful, bordering on spiritual connection that I have with other human beings in the absence of any spiritual belief.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think I can see that it crossing over into various other artistic mediums too.
Yeah.
And it's really cool to see someone else pick up on that and be like, yeah, this is essentially the truth of humanity being displayed.
Yeah, you know when like you're at a gig and you just have a revelation of some sort, you're just like, this is it. Like this is what I should be doing all the time. This is the feeling I should have all the time. And like, I don't know. Yeah, you just feel like a part of everything.
What would you say is the thing that has moved you the most? Like the artwork that's moved you the most, or the comic book, or the movie, or anything, any form of art that's inspired you?
That's so tough.
It's
There's
one
so much of it.
Many.
There's so many things. But I'm really inspired by the punk scene. I really love punk and like Riot Girl.
Yep, sick.
Era,
So Bikini Kill, that kind of thing?
Yeah, exactly. And all that sort of underground frustration art that comes from like a place of everything is shit and I gotta change it. And yeah, it's something really strong about like either being in a punk gig where they like make music about oppression and like how everything is, you know, horrible.
Yes.
It's this sense of like unity and like, yeah, but we're all in it together and I'm not alone in feeling that. Or whether it's like a poster or like a print that someone made based on that kind of punky vibe as well. I guess that's what makes me feel the most things.
Cool.
Yeah.
Would you say that inspires what you do at all as a creative?
Yeah.
So you'd say that's the overriding theme or influence?
Yeah, definitely. My stuff is very do-it-yourself and black and white and ink everywhere, like very. Yeah.
Brilliant. I feel that the Swedish music scene has a lot of that element sitting in its underground. I think it's phenomenal the amount of stuff that comes out of Sweden that manages to make it on a global scale, considering the very small population, comparatively speaking. But I think it's because, to an extent, your government invests back in its artistic programs, and that's something that I wish happened more in Australia. So it's fascinating to me, and I'm sure it is to Mike as well, that you've made the decision to come out to Australia.
I'm moving to Sweden.
I know, everyone keeps saying that. Yeah, I mean,
what prompted that choice?
well, so I was here 8 years ago now on a working holiday visa, and then met my husband, and he's Australian. So then we have lived in Sweden for a while in between, and just moved back again now. So I guess it's more like a personal choice than like basing it off like the politics or the society, but I do enjoy it here, and especially Melbourne is very, like, I feel like the art scene is very inviting and open, and you can find your niche here.
Yes.
In Sweden it's so small that it's kind of hard to find other people doing similar things, or, you know, like, it's just too few people.
Yeah, of course.
It can feel.
That makes total sense.
One of my favourite bands is Swedish.
Me too.
Yeah, which one?
Who's yours?
At the Gates.
Yeah, refused for me.
Yeah.
I got to meet Dennis last year. Blew my mind.
Yeah.
Like, I got into Refused when The Shape of Punk to Come came out in 1998, right? I'm a lot older than I look. Right, and no one knew what the hell I was on about at the time. I was reading about this band. This is the only person with cable internet, you know?
Yeah.
Like, so,
What's that?
who could access it, right? And I was trying to explain to people how rad this album was. They look at me like I'm crazy, and like one person listened to it like nothing, and I'm like, well, it turns out they're completely right.
Yeah.
Like, because most of the punk rock that came out in the 2000s ended up sounding like that record. And I just liked the way it came with the Socialist Manifesto, which really stuck with me.
Just about the thing they said before about how the music in Sweden can be good because like the government pours stuff into it. I was just thinking as well that like even if there are heaps of problems in Sweden, absolutely.
Oh, there is,
but like we have a pretty good social security system. So I feel like if you're an artist, you know that you're gonna be able to survive. You know, like just your basic needs will be okay. You know, like you will have support from the government if you're not in a good place. But so you can have like the freedom to also express yourself in art because you have that security. And I would say like with the modern world it's going down a bit. It's not as good as it has been. But I think that probably makes it easier to try to pursue creative.
I'm definitely moving to Sweden. 100%. Like Melbourne's good and all, but yeah, no, I'll go there. Moving on and taking into like any sort of like artistic elements that you have when writing and doing the art and creating into a comic, does that energize or exhaust you?
Energize me.
Yeah.
Like I can get very exhausted by hanging out with people.
Sorry.
No, not in this, but like you know, being in the city, like there's heaps of people around you, you know, like all this like very social things, and then like when I go into my room and just like draw, I can be there for like 12 hours and forget to eat, and then I feel super excited like afterwards, and after being really tired at the start of it. So I feel like for me it's recharging my battery.
I mean, I was going to say, I'm pretty sure last time you had a couple of drinks afterwards. You were social.
Yeah,
You're just
I
like,
can
that's
do it.
exhausted.
I can do it, but like, if I were to choose between like being on Swanston Street for 12 hours or sitting in my room and draw, then I would draw.
I'm going to go home and drink.
You know, like, yeah.
We have to ask, so it doesn't get forgotten, tell us everything and anything about you doing roller derby.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just drop it all. Just start it from the start.
Just go.
I'm gonna start.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just
So
go.
I watched a movie called Whip It.
I was going to
Have you
ask
seen
you
it?
about Whip It. Yeah, come on.
Yeah. It's, I think it's made a lot of people start or
Cool.
finding roller derby.
Yeah.
So I found that, and I was living in this tiny town in Sweden, like in the north of Sweden, and there was not much happening there. And there was the derby team, which was surprising me, with like 5 people in it. So I decided to join and buy some roller skates, and then I've been doing it for 4 years now. And yeah, it's like, I don't know, like in a way it feels like it connects with all the creative stuff as well, because like you get to express yourself so much. Like
Yeah, totally. And you get to like choose your name, and like you're part of the team, and the team chooses the way that it's going to operate, which is fairly creative in many instances.
yeah, a lot of
What is your
strategy.
name?
My name is just Frankie. It used to be Fuck Off Frankie.
I like that
Based off a punk band in Sweden called Fuck Frankie.
Awesome.
And my last name, which is Frank. And also on track, in the beginning, I was very aggressive. I did a lot of big hits. I should say it's a full contact sport.
Yes.
And
We love those in Australia.
yeah, so it was natural. But then when I came here, the club I was joining told me that, you know, we have a family event and Fuck Off is a little bit, you know.
Events for roller
Yeah,
derby. I
I
just
know.
thought that. I'm like,
No, there is, because it's heavily linked to the rockabilly and psychobilly scene.
Yeah.
Psychobilly and rockabilly scenes in Victoria actually skew to mid-30s to early 40s generally, and that age group tend to now have kids.
Yeah.
I just want to see all
I
these
love
kids
it.
at Cherry Bar. Like,
Yeah.
is that like all kids just lined up?
Yeah, like before it used to be, when it was much bigger and much more of a trend, it used to have like gigs.
Yeah,
combined
definitely.
with-
Yeah, you
with
have
the
like,
kids.
I think I saw a couple of bands. Well, first the Ramshackle Army played one.
I was gonna say that.
Yeah, and what was
Cotton
that?
Mouth.
Graveyard Train.
Yeah.
That kind of thing, which was fun. But my sister used to be in roller derby as well. She was a jammer.
Cool.
Yeah,
I'm a blocker.
for Rosebud.
Yeah.
So are you currently in the Victorian Roller Derby League?
Yeah, exactly. So that's also another reason why I wanted to move here, because Victorian Roller Derby League's A team is the best team in the world.
Yes.
And they just played champs now and came second. And last year they came first. So to come here and like have that level of coaching and stuff was like a really big part of moving to Melbourne.
Brilliant. Have you had an opportunity to go out to Austin at all? In Texas?
No, I'm in the C team,
Yeah.
so I got a bit to go.
Yeah.
But we get to travel a lot in Australia though. Like we played 6 tournaments last year.
Brilliant.
Get to go to.
Who's your toughest competitor?
I think it's well, apart from the B team in our own league that we play every
It's like
week.
Australia A in the cricket.
Yeah, exactly. But otherwise, Sydney is very tough, and
fuck
BCR, Brisbane City Rollers. Yeah.
No one likes Sydney. If you live in Melbourne, you hate Sydney. I do.
Well, the derby players are really nice though.
Yeah, that's good. To be honest, I don't mind it. I think it's got its own charm.
Yeah.
It's just a bit chaotic for me, and I probably could never live there.
Yeah.
It's got charm for everyone else.
Good to visit.
Speaking of charm for everyone else, why don't you tell us about your work and plug your socials?
And my socials.
Yeah.
Well, okay, about my artistic work.
Yeah, the artistic work.
Yeah, well, okay, so I make comics about my life and about like what it's like to be a woman in hospitality and in general, and you know, like a lot of frustration comes through, and there's a little bit about cats and procrastination from doing what you actually love.
Procrastination.
Yeah, that too. I have that on the front of that scene, so yeah.
I'm getting that.
Great minds think alike.
That's perfect.
Yeah, there's a little pin on the front there, on me, I guess. Yeah. Yeah, it's like black and white, kind of messy, you know.
Awesome. And what's it called?
Well, I don't have a name for it really, because all the stuff is called different things. So the first one is as if I didn't have enough problems.
Cool.
And the second one is called Pro. So procrastination professional.
Brilliant.
Yeah. And on social media, I'm just my name, which is really hard to pronounce. And so maybe you'll have to write it.
Yeah, we'll put the link down.
Yeah. So yeah.
Fantastic. Well, we do one thing with every guest.
Yeah.
It's called a rad break.
Yeah.
It's like a tiny little segment.
It's like a game show. We ask you a question, and depending on that question, you give an answer. So for yours, we have one which is rad or fad. So I'll say something, you go, this is rad because, or this is a fad because, and then that's it. So
Okay.
it's as simple as that. So
You kind of have to explain what fad means, though.
Okay,
I'm not sure.
yeah, that's okay. Fad is
a flavour of
a flavor of the
so
month,
it's
so
not
like a
something-
short-lived thing.
Yeah, like something that
Yeah.
will pop up and you'll be like, oh, yeah, like awesome, and then it's gone in like a week's time.
Like Pokemon Go.
Right. Okay. and then rad is more like something that.
That's
It's good,
rad,
like, you
it's
want
just
to
awesome,
say,
yeah.
That's
like
awesome.
radical.
Yeah.
and,
Okay, so
cool.
fad is a little bit like.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's not a good thing.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so rad or fad. For you, I think the good one would be creative journalism.
Rad,
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah.
Is it here to stay? Do you think like websites like, let's say, Vice and any of those where it's not run by a franchise itself and sort of lets each writer have their own opinion, is that something here to stay?
Yeah. I think we're like humans are not ready for social media and stuff, and like commercial stuff, and like I feel like it's a phase now, but it's gonna like the artistic and the more like meaningful stuff is gonna come back, and I feel like people are gonna feel like they need it more and more because we're so overwhelmed with all the other shit.
I still believe that like the world would benefit if we lost the internet.
Yeah.
I don't, because of the power it has. It's misuse of the medium that causes the issue. It can be very empowering, but we use it as a distraction more. But it is interesting that you're saying that you think creative journalism is going to stick around. I personally really miss long form content.
Yeah.
As a writer, I used to really enjoy doing it, and I miss it, and I really hope that the impetus on quality journalism that actually takes you inside the mind of the person they're interviewing or makes an actual objective point in the process instead of just being clickbait comes back.
Exactly, and that's like the reason why it's so sad to be a journalist as well, because like you go into it thinking, I'm gonna change the world, or I'm gonna, write things about these amazing people and things that happen, or like really critical pieces on this and this, and then you come to work and you're like, you got 10 minutes to write this, and it needs to get a lot of clicks and attention, so you kind of feel like your soul is just getting drained.
You're not winning that Pulitzer Prize. Now you get to hear, what has the Royals done this time that we have to hear about? You won't believe it until you click this link.
Exactly, yeah.
Or like recently we had the royal family visit, or some member of the royal family visit, and like nearly every trending article was top 10 things that the royals said today.
Yeah.
1, who cares? 2, why is that news?
Exactly. And I've been really lucky because I've been working in public service, so
Yes.
it runs a bit different, and you get to do more of that in-depth stuff. But it's still, like, the rest is still affecting it, and the way that, consumers expect things to be. So, yeah, it's spilling over into all the areas of journalism as well, which is sad, I think.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for joining us, Aila. That was awesome.
Thanks for having me.
It's always good getting different people on because everyone has like different viewpoints and attitudes towards everything. So
Raditude.
Really, a raditude. You definitely have a raditude, and you're definitely a rattle.
You do too.
So thank you very much.
Well, I'm not a crook.